Okay, song one. The first stop on this magical mystery something. I knew out of the gate that I wanted to do something kind of up tempo, potentially a little more fun. Yeah, I think it's a pretty strong start to the project. We'll talk about why after you hear it. So here it is, song one with a bullet, stuck in the same rut.
When I was 13, the old man said to me words that were burned in my mind. Try not to step on anything if you ever go back in time. But into the future, you're fine. So I made my way into the future, armed with 2 flash grenades and some suture. Caught up with old friends who're still just hanging out, pissing into the wind. Stuck in the same rut again. No one should know too much about their destiny. Wise words from Emmett Brown. But I already know when I'm going to die, and where my body will be found, and who will and who won't be around. And I already know who will corrode me, thanks to my body's weight in peyote. Back in the saddle on drugs and booze addled, waiting for my real life to begin. Stuck in the same rut again. After 40 years of acting like an asshole, I'm ready to keep acting like an asshole. I'm just a rover, the world passes over like some sort of never has been. Stuck in the same rut.
I was exploring this notion of, a person sort of looking back in their own timeline and identifying moments that maybe they could remove in order to reinvent the present. And as I started to brainstorm on that, I realized that I accidentally stumbled into the plot of a Simpsons episode. Homer invents a time machine, goes back in time. Okay, don't panic. Remember the words your dad said to you on your wedding day. And then there's this overlay of Abraham Simpson saying, if you ever go back in time, don't step on anything. Well, maybe I can explore that, and maybe that could be some sort of fun. So I just decided to write it out and, see where it went. So yeah, we start the song. When I was 13, the old man said to me words that were burned in my mind. Try not to step on anything if you ever go back in time. But into the future, you're fine. Everybody knows if you travel into the future, you can step on whatever you want, and there's no consequences. So I made my way into the future armed with 2 flash grenades and some suture. I liked the idea of having flash grenades. Caught up with old friends who were still just hanging out, pissing into the wind. And I had a bunch of different ways I went with this initially, and ultimately ended up with what became the theme of the song, which is I get to the future and I see that everything's pretty much the same. Not a lot has changed, and really I'm stuck in the same rut. I sort of found myself into the theme of the song by just kind of exploring this original reference to a Simpsons episode. Didn't really know where it was going to go until it kind of got there. I liked the idea of having flash grenades. But we go into the second verse. I'm in the future. My first impression of the future is that everything's the same. What's happened with this friend and what's happened with that friend. And then as I was kind of like mentally looking around, I mentally noticed that I'm not there. Why am I not around? And then I, started to kind of explore that. As I started to piece that kind of together and map it out, sort of gotten basically to roughly what would have been the end of the second verse time-wise, and hadn't really revisited the theme of being stuck in a rut again. Well, what if I just start from that point where I already know what happened to me, which is I'm dead, and I know how I'm going to die, and who kills me, and why, and so that's really where we start. No one should know too much about their destiny. Wise words from Emmett Brown. Okay, so another pop culture reference to Back to the Future. Sort of a symmetry with the first verse, in that it also starts with a pop culture reference. But I already know when I'm going to die and where my body will be found and who will and who won't be around. There's this time travel backdrop to the theme of the song, which has nothing to do with time travel. I knew that I wanted to potentially visit the idea of how time travel, happened. But I didn't want to go into explaining it in depth, because then I'm essentially in a different song about something else. Or I didn't really know how to do like some sort of just kind of drop in line that explains it. Like if I can't take the time to explain it and I can't just drop in a reference that will explain it, then the third alternative is it didn't happen at all. So I've already seen who's Will Garot me thanks to my body's weight in peyote. So I was just on drugs, and that's how all of this um, came to be. Back in the saddle, I'm drugs and booze addled, so I'm coming down now, waiting for my real life to begin. I'm in another dimension mentally and thinking about all the ways in any scenario, past, present, or future. You know, I'm waiting for a change. I'm waiting for some kind of realization. But really, the only realization that comes is that I'm still stuck in the same rut. And this is kind of gets doubled down in the last chorus. After 40 years of acting like an asshole, I'm ready to keep acting like an asshole. So I briefly thought about the idea of, you know, the character could learn something and have some kind of arc, but you can't learn something and be stuck in a rut. Yeah, so I'm just a rover. The world passes over like some sort of never have been, blaming the world for my inability to learn lessons. I think my overall impression of the song, I like it. I think it's pretty solid. I think it has a consistent narrative through line. You know, thematically stays on point, which is a big step up from last week's song. It definitely gets kind of tongue in cheek and silly, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just kind of the tone with which that story came out and ended up being delivered. Quite frankly, if I can get through this project and everything I do is this good or better, I think I'm in pretty good shape. I like the idea of having flash grenades, and I can't wait to see what happens next week. See you then.